Hi, this book is called Boy, Tales of Childhood by Roald Dahl. For Alfhild, Elsie, Asta, Ellen, and Lewis. An autobiography is a book a person writes about his own life, and it is usually full of all sorts of boring details. This is not an autobiography. I would never write a history of myself. On the other hand, throughout my young days at school and just afterwards, a number of things happened to me that I have never forgotten. None of these things is important, but each of them made such a tremendous impression on me that I have never been able to get them out of my mind. Each of them, even after a lapse of 50 and sometimes 60 years, has remained seared on my memory. I didn't have to search for any of them. All I had to do was skim them off the top of my consciousness and write them down. Some are funny, some are painful, some are unpleasant. I suppose that is why I have always remembered them so vividly. All are true. R.D. That stands for Roald Dahl. Starting point. Pictures. The first picture says Wendy House. The second picture at the bottom says Alfred, Ellen, and Elsie, me and Aston. Raider? I can't read it. Papa and Mama. My father. Charlie has a message for you. Please. Please subscribe. That's his message. You can or you don't have to. Are you okay? You hurt yourself. Rocking chairs are wooden. They're kind of dangerous. Papa and Mama. Sorry. Are you okay, Charlie?
I'm fine.
Okay. Sorry about that. My father, Roald Dahl, was a Norwegian who came from a small town near Oslo called Sarpsborg. His own father, my grandfather, was a fairly prosperous merchant who owned a store in Sarpsborg and traded in just about everything from cheese to chicken wire. Come on over here and say hi. I am writing, you can okay. I am writing these words in 1984, but this grandfather of mine was born, believe it or not, in 1820, shortly after Wellington had defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. If my grandfather had been alive today, he would have been 164 years old. My father would have been 121. Both my father and my grandfather were late starters so far as children were concerned. When my father was 14, which is still more than 100 years ago, he was up on the roof of the family house. I'm just checking I thought maybe I should turn it up. He was up on the roof of the family house replacing some loose tiles when he slipped and fell. He broke his left arm below the elbow. Somebody ran to fetch the doctor, and half an hour later this gentleman made a majestic and drunken arrival in his horse-drawn buggy. Hey, Charlie, can you please stop that, honey? The noise is really... He broke his left arm... Oh, I read that. He was so drunk that he mistook... Sorry, that's not funny. That he mistook the fractured elbow for a dislocated shoulder. We'll soon put this back into place, he cried out. And two men were called off the street to help with the pulling. They were instructed to hold my father by the waist while the doctor grabbed him by the wrist of the broken arm and shouted, "Pull, men, pull! Pull as hard as you can!" The pain must have been excruciating. The victim screamed, and his mother, who was watching the performance in horror, shouted, "Stop!" But by then the pullers had done so much damage that a splinter of bone was sticking out through the skin of the forearm. I'm sorry, that's gross. Anyhow, this was in 1877, and orthopedic surgery is not what it is today. So they simply amputated the arm at the elbow, and for the rest of his life, my father had to manage with one arm. Fortunately, it was the left arm that he lost, and gradually, over the years, he taught himself to do more or less anything he wanted. Are you okay? Somebody just wiped out. I'm sorry. Anything he wanted with just, okay, guys, I think they get the point. If they want to subscribe, hit subscribe. If you don't want to, it's perfectly fine. unfortunately was the left arm that he lost, and gradually over the years he taught himself to do more or less anything he wanted with just the 4 fingers and thumb of his right hand. He could tie a shoelace as quickly as you or me. And for cutting up the food on his plate, he sharpened the bottom edge of a fork so that it served as both knife and fork all in one. He kept his ingenious instrument in a slim leather case and carried it in his pocket wherever he went. The loss of an arm, he used to say, caused him only one serious inconvenience. He found it impossible to cut the top off a boiled egg. There's the picture. My father was a year or so older than his brother Oscar, but they were exceptionally close, and soon after they left school they went for a long walk together to plan their future. They decided that a small town like Sarpsborg and a small town like Norway was no place in which to make a fortune. So what they must do, they agreed, was go away to one of the big countries, either to England or France, where opportunities to make good would be boundless. Their own father, an amiable giant, nearly 7 feet tall, lacked the drive and ambition of his sons, and he refused to support this tomfool idea. When he forbade them to go, they ran away from home, and somehow or other the two of them managed to work their way to France on a cargo ship. Okay, there's the picture of the father. From Calais they went to Paris, and in Paris they agreed to separate because each of them wished to be independent of the other. Sorry, I said Paris instead of Paris. Most people say Paris. I said Paris. Uncle Oscar, for some reason, headed west for La Rochelle on the Atlantic coast, while my father remained in Paris for the time being. The story of how these two brothers each started a totally separate business in different countries and how each of them made a fortune is interesting. But there is no time to tell it here except in the briefest manner. Take my Uncle Oscar first. La Rochelle was then, and still is, a fishing port. By the time he was 40, he had become the wealthiest man in town. He owned a fleet of trawlers called Pêcheurs d'Atlantique, and a large canning factory to can the sardines his trawlers brought in. He acquired a wife from a good family and a magnificent townhouse, as well as a large chateau in the country. You can come say hi if you want to. They love it. He became a collector of Louis XV furniture, good pictures, and rare books, and all these beautiful things. Louis. That's our pizza. We're having pizza for lunch. Good pictures and rare books, and all of these beautiful things together with the 2 properties are still in the family. Dom, can you say hi?
Huh?
They love it when somebody stops and says hi.
Who?
Okay. Dom's gonna say hi now.
Who is this?
Ron and Penny.
Oh, hi, guys.
He's on a little break from work. Lunch break, probably. Well, let me find my place. I have not seen the chateau in the country, but I was in the La Rochelle house a couple of years ago, and it really is something. The furniture alone should be in a museum. While Uncle Oscar was bustling around in La Rochelle, his one-armed brother, Roald, my own father, was not sitting on his rump doing nothing. He had met in Paris another young Norwegian called Adnisen, and the two of them now decided to form a partnership and become shipbrokers. A shipbroker is a person who supplies a ship with everything it needs when it comes into port. Fuel and food, ropes and paint, soap and towels, hammer and nails, and thousands of other tiddly little items. A shipbroker, we have 2 minutes left, is a kind of enormous shopkeeper for ships, and by far the most important item he supplies to them is the fuel on which the ship's engines run. In those days, fuel meant only one thing. It meant coal. There was no oil-burning motor ships on the high seas at that time. All ships were steamships, and those old steamers would take on hundreds and often thousands of coal in one go. To the shipbrokers, coal was black gold. So here are the train cars. Hope you can see them. On one it says paint. On the second one it says ropes. And on the third one it says soap. My father and his newfound friend, Mr. Adnison, understood all this very well. It made sense, they told each other, to set up their shipbroking business in one of the great coaling ports of Europe. Which was it to be? The answer was simple. The greatest coaling port in the world at that time was Cardiff in South Wales. So off to Cardiff they went, these two ambitious young men, carrying with them little or no luggage. But my father had something more delightful than luggage. He had a wife, a young French girl called Marie, whom he had recently married in Paris. In Cardiff, the shipbroking firm of Adnison and Dahl was set up, and a single room in Bute Street was rented as an office. From then on, we have what sounds like one of those exaggerated fairy stories of success. But in reality, it was the result of tremendous hard and brainy work by those two friends. Very soon, Adnison and Dahl had more business than the partners could handle alone. Larger office space was acquired, and more staff were engaged. Sounds like your office, maybe. Right? I'm just going to finish the page. The real money then began rolling in. Within a few years, my father was able to buy a fine house in the village of Llandaff, just outside Cardiff, and there his wife Marie bore him 2 children, a girl and a boy. But tragically, she died after giving birth to the second child. When the shock and sorrow of her death had begun to subside a little, my father suddenly realized that his 2 small children ought, at the very least, to have a stepmother to care for them.
Unknown caller.
Hello? This is she. I don't know what office you're calling from. I'm sorry. Is there any way I could give you a call back? I'm right in the middle of reading to a senior. Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry. Are you at I'm sorry, what number? I just called this number. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, though. Bye-bye. Sorry, guys. Good news is I'm going to the doctor's. That's good. Tomorrow. Okay. Sorry. The real money then began rolling in. Within a few years, my father was able to buy a fine house in the village of Llandaff, just outside Cardiff. I know I read that. And there his wife Marie bore him 2 children, a girl and a boy. But tragically, she died after giving birth to the second child. When the shock and sorrow of her death had begun to subside a little, my father suddenly realized that his 2 small children ought, at the very least, to have a stepmother to care for them. What is more, he felt terribly lonely. It was quite obvious that he must try to find himself another wife. But this was easier said than done for a Norwegian living in South Wales who didn't know very many people. So he decided to take a holiday and travel back to his own country, Norway. And who knows, he might, if he was lucky, find himself a lovely new bride in his own country. And that's the end of that page. But it does show on the next page, it says Mama Engaged. So this is Roald Dahl's Mama. And this is Roald Dahl at 8 months. Isn't he a cutie? Look at that. Hey Louie, can you get Charlie and Paul and tell them to come down for a minute? Please. Thank you. It'll just take a minute. Thank you, dear. So I told Louie to bring Charlie and Paul down just so they can say goodbye to you. They ran off because they like to play basketball and do whatever they're doing. And I think their reading time was over. So they're going to say goodbye, and then we're going to end the video. Okay? Let me move out of the way. Come on, you guys. All you have to say, bye.
Bye.
And please subscribe as they, no, whatever. Okay, that's the end. Take care. Love you. Bye-bye.